New topic, license plate relocation. Now here's a video. I think this is probably a Road King because it's got soft bags. But Road Kings and Street Glides come with a different license plate mounting hardware, and there's holes drilled in the fender here. So, but this license plate that you can see on the left looks pretty lame to me. You know, it just doesn't look right. It's just standing up there. It kind of looks out of place. And this guy is addressing that ugliness with a lay down license plate frame, but he's keeping it above the tail light. So the tail light license plate lens is still pointing up and still illuminating the plate. So this is a solution if you have a Street Glide or a Road King that has holes already drilled in the fenders there. If you have an Electric Glide or an Ultra, you don't have those holes in the fender, so there's no reason to mount the license plate above the tail light. If you want to clean up the fender even more, you can buy a different tail light and put the license plate underneath it instead, and you won't have any ugly holes showing. So this is a Street Glide here. Let's see what I have written here. License plate below the tail light. So this is a new trend. You have a Street Glide on the left and a Road Glide on the right. And both of them have the license plate mounted underneath the tail light, I guess, or the lights, the turn signal lights. Now these turn signal lights are running lights on both of these bikes. So you have a running light and brake light and turn signal all into one. There's no other lights on this bike, so there's, you know, the turn signals function as a brake light and a running light. But anyways, the reason I put these pictures in here is just to show you what a clean fender looks like with the license plate mounted below the tail light, or the turn signal in this case. Okay, here's a couple photos of, on the left, it's probably a Road King with soft bags, and then on the right, some kind of Electric Glide or Ultra, and you can basically tell that from, you know, by the wide turn signal bar. And these guys both have the license plate mounted underneath the turn signal bar tail light assembly. Well, it's not actually, it's actually two different things, not an assembly, but the license plate is mounted underneath, and in between, you know, the turn signal bar and the rear fender light, fender tip light of some sort. So I had a bike, basically, you know, mine looks like the one on the right, more like the one on the right, except for it's got a Willie G skull covering to that light where the skull shines through. But other than that, it's about the same. And this is kind of what you know, what it would look like at the back of your bike with the license plate mounted underneath the turn signal and above whatever kind of light you have back there. So a couple other things that I like in these bikes is the one on the left that has, you know, the smoke tail light, and that's real trendy now for some reason. Naturally, when you put a smoke tail light in, you're going to have a red LED bulb in there. Where, you know, if you had a red lens, you would only need a regular bulb, you know, just a white bulb. And on the right, this guy has smoke turn signals. And if you do that, naturally, you're going to need, you probably had amber on there before with white bulbs. So you're going to need either amber bulbs or red bulbs. Now, across the United States, the DOT defines, you know, what you need for turn signal bulbs and, you know, tail lights, brake lights. You know, brake lights need to be red. Running lights in the back of your car need to be red. Turn signals can be red or amber. So if you're from Europe, you know, the requirement is amber only. But in the United States, even on cars, amber's kind of gone bye-bye. You know, most cars, I mean, my cars have a, you know, red turn signals in the back. So just something to keep in mind. If you go with smoke lenses, you're going to have to put some kind of colored bulb in there. Just make sure you grab the right color. Turn signals, you have a choice. You don't have a choice for the brake light or the running light. It has to be red when viewed from behind. And another thing I like on the bike on the right is the lay down tail light. It kind of, goes in line with the fender. It doesn't stick out as much. The issue with those lay down lights is that most of them don't have any kind of license plate light, and even if they did, it wouldn't illuminate this license plate because the turn signal bars on electric glides or ultras cover up just about all of the bottom of the tail light lens. So even if you had a window down there, to where you can light up your license plate, it's not going to light up your license plate because it's just not designed to do that. The Harley designed this so that the lens that illuminates your license plate is on top. And, that's because the turn signal bars just would cover up the lens and you wouldn't get any light on your license plate. So once you decide to put the license plate below the tail light turn signal combination, you're going to need to figure out a way to illuminate your license plate. And also back here, notice that you probably have a lower light that's just like an accent light. So these lights aren't designed, to, make your bike visible from the back if your tail light goes out. It's just a really little bulb, and it's just an accent light. But you can use the wiring for that to illuminate your license plate. And also, once you decide to move your license plate to the back, if you take that light off, you're going to have a bunch of holes. So then, your decision is already made on where the license plate goes. You're going to have to cover the holes. So here's my bike, and on the back, I kind of liked it. It had the little skull guy on the bottom, and I'm trying to fit it's a really high light. It's not the Willie G skull. That's just the cover for the lens. But for some reason on this year, that rear light is really high, and there's not enough room really to put a license plate in between the tail light and the accent light on the bottom. So the issue on the left is, you can see it's still, it won't quite fit there, and it's about 1/4 of an inch away from the fender. So, that's not good. So I decided I had some, my woodworking shop has a bunch of non-wood stuff in it, like a bunch of aluminum pieces. And, this is a piece of HDPE, high density polyethylene. And this is actually structural parts that you use to make boats out of, big boats, custom boats. So, this is a 1-inch thick piece of stuff here. And I decided, well, it's not going to take me that long to cut this out. So I cut out a little triangle, then I took it to my Big Jet belt and disc sander, and cleaned it up a little bit. And, that takes care of it being 1/4 inch away. So I can mount it the way I have it on the left. But then I decided against it. So, it only took me probably 5 minutes to make that piece, cut it out with a bandsaw, and take it over to the jet sander for a little bit. So I decided to remove that bottom light, and you're left with a bunch of holes here. So what you have is a big round hole where the wiring comes in, and then you have that D-shaped hole, which is actually a little clamp to hold the wiring away from the tire as your wiring, goes up through your fender. And then you have this big rivet that's not actually centered, and it on the other side is a bolt that you bolt things to, like the accent light. And then you have 2 other holes that are put here. But unfortunately, you can't use those 2 other holes to mount this new license plate frame that I have. So you have to drill 2 new holes. So what I did was, I just took some, I was sloppy about this. I just took some, and I painted my fender. We'll take a look at that later. But I just sprayed some Rust-Oleum on the fender here and put, 3 or 4 coats of Rust-Oleum, and then I dabbed some on with a foam brush. And that's because, I didn't want the fender to rust behind the license plate frame, and I'm drilling new holes. So, I really coated this really good so the new holes wouldn't start to rust, because you can imagine inside of a Fender, um, you're going to have a lot of water, right? So you want to take care of that. So, I sprayed the inside of this really good when I drilled the new holes and dabbed it, and then I dabbed the outside. And here's just a bucket of Rust-Oleum. And God, this is probably a 10-year-old can of Rust-Oleum. It's still good though. Um, and if you do drill new holes, make sure you seal them really good. And here's some pictures. Now, for some reason, when I took off the Tour-Pak, I had some scratches in my fender. I thought, how the hell did I get scratches on my fender? They're behind the seat, which would have been underneath the old Tour-Pak. I have no idea how scratches popped up there. And I thought about rubbing them out. I actually did start to rub them out, and then I saw, well, there's a chip too. So I decided to paint the rear fender. Now, if you look on YouTube, you see a bunch of guys painting the rear fender. It's just part of painting your bike. You have the rear fender, the saddlebags, and some side covers, and the front fender, and the gas tank. And you paint all those. You change the color of your bike. But taking off the rear fender is a real pain in the butt, because it's just a lot of work. You got to take the shocks off, the brake, the wheel out. There's just a lot of it's another day added to your job. And I decided, I could just cover up that chrome bar and basically paint everything that shows in place. Give it a nice black paint job. Now on the left, after I put a few coats of paint on, I'm using an HVLP sprayer here. It's the smallest gun that I have. And I laid down some nice layers of paint. You can see on the left, I'm looking at the reflection of a light in my ceiling, and it looks a little wavy. You can't really tell that it's wavy by looking at the paint. You can just tell the reflection of the light. And I compared that with the gas tank. And Harley's, original paint job is a little wavy too, but mine's a little wavier. so I decided, all right, instead of painting again, sanding it down and painting it, let me just try to sand it down and polish it. So, I sanded it down first with 800 grit sandpaper, which is really, really fine. And all of the sandpaper is much, I'm working in a woodworking shop, and you don't need 2500 grit for anything in the woodworking world. The reason I have it is to sharpen chisels. And, I put it like a mirror finish on my chisels and my plane blades. And that's what I use. Is I, take some of these pieces of adhesive back fine sandpaper and put them down on a engineering surface and hone the blade. So I sanded it first with 800, and then with 1000, and then 1500, and then 2500. And then I got out my trusty Porter cable polisher. This is like the holy grail of the car detailing world. It's a real famous piece of equipment here, the Porter cable polisher. So, I had some Sonus pads and put some Sonus fine stuff on. I think I started with I don't know, I mixed up to whether a green pad or the orange pad is the finest. But I went over it with some fine on some pad, and then I went over it with some extra fine polishing stuff with the extra fine pad. And what I got was on the right. You can see that reflection of the light now is perfect. It's better than the Harley stuff. So you can paint your fender in place if you take your Tour-Pak off and find that there's some scratches and stuff in your fender. And this it actually took a few days, because I put a lot of coats on it, and I was working on other things while I was doing this. But it's probably got maybe 6 coats of paint on it and then polished. New topic, license plate lighting. So, as I said before, if you decide to move your license plate and put it below the tail light, which I think is a really good way to clean up your fender, then your old tail light is not going to work for illuminating the license plate, and you have to come up with something else. Now, the photo that you see on the left is a bike that I saw only after I was done with this license plate project because I didn't know that this type of turn signal bar with a built-in license plate light below it, I didn't know that part existed until I was finished. And the only reason that I saw this bike is I was on a Facebook group chat once with some touring bikes. It's a group with 70,000 members, and I was talking about a different subject, and this guy sent me a picture of his bike. And you can see that that would be a really good solution. And the reason that I never saw it before is because I was looking in, Electroglide Ultra Land, and this is not an Electroglide. This is a Street Glide where the guy added lower fairings and a Tour-Pak. So it's a different animal. That's why it has a different solution for a license plate light. And it's a newer bike with a 4-point mounting system. You can see underneath the Tour-Pak. But that would be a good solution if you want to look up the part number for that turn signal bar. But again, I didn't see it. So if you can get that bar, that would be a as good a solution as anything else. Now this guy chose to leave his bumper on the bottom, and I removed mine, but it doesn't look that bad on this bike. I'm not sure if I have a picture of his bike without the Tour-Pak on it. But if you look in eBay and you look for, or Amazon, but eBay's a little better categorized. Look under eBay, under, eBay Motors, and under motorcycle parts, and then under lighting, there's a section for license plate lighting. There's a whole directory for that. And if you look on eBay, you're going to see all kinds of crazy stuff like an LED strip, that goes, because, these are people that don't know what a Harley is, and they're Chinese people from China, or they're Chinese Americans from the San Gabriel Valley that, they import stuff from, they buy stuff off of Alibaba in quantities, and they sell it and try to pass it off as a license plate light. But keep in mind, whatever you use back there, the idea is to point down to, or point up, depending on where your license plate is, to the license plate and illuminate it, and not have any white light shining behind you. So as you can see, the typical looking license plate light on the upper right here in the photo, that's made to be underneath the trunk, where the black part would shield the drivers behind you from a white light. And that's something you don't see, in most of the items that are for sale on eBay underneath license plate lighting, because it's not made for a motorcycle. It's not made for a license plate light either in most cases. Then you have the bolt-on LEDs, which, are the LEDs built into the bolts for the license plate, which might be a good solution. I thought about that, and then I just wondered, what the life is of these, because they're in a very wet environment, and they don't look like they're sealed that great. But, if you use these, you might have to put them on every couple years, but it looks like a viable solution. And on the right, you can see a little made specifically for illuminating license plates, but, it doesn't come with a housing or anything. So what I did is, not knowing that this bar on the left exists, I decided to make my own license plate light frame, and it's on the right there. So these are just some ideas. I'm not going to talk about them very much, but if you go with that 5 LED light, you can make some kind of housing for it out of aluminum channel. If you have a flat license plate frame, this would be pretty easy, because you could rivet a piece of aluminum channel right onto the back of the license plate frame, and that would work for a flat frame. If it's a curved frame, you could still do it, but it would, you're riveting a flat piece to a curved piece, so it'll get a little bit trickier. But anyways, these are just some ideas I was tossing around, and I just put them up here for you to consider. You can do whatever you want for a license plate light housing. I just chose to make my own. And here you can see some, aluminum channel. If you decide to go with something like that, if you're going to use a piece of flat channel on a curved frame, then, I have a drawing on the lower left where you cut out part of it to make it narrower. If you only have like a 1-inch piece, you can rivet that to a straight frame. Okay. So that's just an idea. And if you choose to get a piece of this aluminum channel, make sure it's like 2 inches or 2.5 inch aluminum channel, and then you'll have to cut part of it on the right so that the cover of the light doesn't cover up your license plate. So this is just an idea here. I chose not to do this, but you might want to. And instead I used a piece of channel that I had laying around the shop. Now, I have a lot of aluminum pieces cut off in the shop because I use aluminum a lot in my woodworking projects. For example, I have a home theater cabinet that I built. It's got it's got 2 towers and then a horizontal part, and it's about what is it? I think it's like 9 feet wide by 9 feet tall. It obviously isn't a high ceiling room. And the part that's horizontal it has a span of about, over 6 feet, and it has drawers in it. And I didn't want that to ever bow. So I put in a bunch of pieces of aluminum angle, like some real heavy 1/2 inch thick aluminum angle. I think it's 2 inch by 2 inch. And then I used a piece of this stuff to span it. And, I built that 10 years ago, and it still hasn't drooped even, a millimeter in the metal. So I use a lot of aluminum channel in woodworking projects and big projects. And I had this piece left over, and I thought, hey, this would make a good license plate frame. So I cut a couple holes in it so that it would use the same holes as the license plate frame. I don't have to drill any additional holes for it. And here's just a test fit. I made the holes in the aluminum a little bit bigger so you can move it around a little bit, up and down a little bit. And this is what it kind of looked like. And I thought I could make that work. And it's a nice clean look. And, soldering, whenever you do soldering, in automotive, I try to first pin the solder a little bit, and then we'll put the shrink wrap on. I usually use 2 or 3 layers of shrink wrap, and then I'll also use some material to cover the wiring if it's in a wet environment, a tubing. But here you can see the soldering's just pinned right now, and then I go over it and make sure that the connection is completely soldered from one end to the other, and then I put in a couple layers of shrink wrap. So, and then I painted it black, and I thought, well, it holds this light pretty good, but I don't really like it black like that. So I decided actually early to put something over this. And here's some ideas if you want to put something over that little cover. And I went with the American flag because, I had an American flag on the back of my Tour-Pak, and now I don't. So right now the rear end has an American flag on that little black piece, and it looks pretty decent.